slow. Again, I can't take anything off the table. Anything is possible. Our investigation is very active and going. And I think a lot of you who cover this office know that when we say such things, that developments are certainly foreseeable. But I cannot predict them sitting here today. All right, thank you, everyone.
Thank you. What part of this business empire is exposed to support the church?
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
All right, people. Great. So that is the official press conference. I do know there was an additional, area that was set up outside. Not too sure if, maybe any other authorities will get to this spot, that they'll be able to conduct something meaningful. Maybe some other questions could be asked. I guess whoever the AP reporter is, they're just like, they only showed this one thing. Now, here's the thing, chat. I do have the documents here for you. It's actually slow to be updated, I guess, because he hasn't appeared in court yet, which I thought he actually did, but he hasn't. They kind of unsealed it, but not officially, where it's fully in the system where you can look up any federal case. So it's not in the site that I usually use, but the documents are available, right? I think directly through the clerk. We're going to read the whole indictment. I do want to skip ahead, and this is kind of jumping ahead here, because I think I'm going off my train of thought. The U.S. attorney said repeatedly, there are certain things, more details that might not be in the indictment that's in the memo for detention. So essentially, there's a bunch of documents filed. Okay, here's the initial indictment, but we're also filing a memo for detention, hoping that the judge or the magistrate judge says, hey, we're going to deny bond, at least at this time, until, we'll reconsider maybe at a different point. I have that document, and before we do get into the indictment, I do want to explore the possibility of, could Diddy get out on bail, right? And also, it's going to give us some more details about what they're using, and what you're going to realize is, I think by now, either Cassie or the feds with Cassie leaked that video, because that video of Diddy beating Cassie in that hotel, it's actually it's referenced in a detention memo and the indictment. Okay, so let's do the math here. Like, it's clear that the feds probably played a nasty game with Diddy. Probably was also trying to encourage more witnesses to come forward, right? Because when people seen that video, everybody backed up off Diddy, like, oh shit, never mind, it's not a witch hunt. This shit's true. So it kind of looks like, hold on. No, this is the wrong thing I pulled up. Sorry. What the fuck? Oh, I didn't put it on screen yet. Give me 1 second. Did I send the right thing? Give me 1 second. So what I'm about to put up on screen is the detention memo. And this detention memo is supplementary to the indictment that essentially is going to spell out a few things that the prosecutor believes should keep Diddy in jail. Right? Here we go.
The audio is
okay. Yeah. So I'm gonna keep an eye on this to see if they go outside or there's more stuff. I'm pretty sure. Let's go to another outlet. Let's go to CNN or something like that. CNN. Imagine they would have like a live stream going on. Maybe not. I guess only AP has it right now. Let me just search Diddy. I just want to see if anyone else is, doing some type of. Yeah. AP's pretty much point on this. Cool. All right. So we'll keep this going on in the background. I'm hoping they go outside that we can hear some more information. Here's the thing, though. So this was filed. This is a detention memo for Sean Combs, which means this is the prosecutors attempt to try to make sure he's denied bail. Now, we went over this last night. Factors in determining bail, federal court, we came up with a list, right? And the list was seen as the defendant's flight risk, defendant's criminal history, severity of the alleged crime, defendant's ties to the community, employment status, financial resources, mental health and substance abuse history. There's other things that we're going to come into, the defendant's risk of reoffending, history of appearing in court, a lot of things, okay? Potential danger to the community or specific individuals, okay. Now, let's read this letter. It's 16 pages, right? It's actually longer than the indictment. So it says, Dear Judge, the defendant, Sean Diddy Combs, was taken into custody this morning after a grand jury sitting in this district returned a 3-count indictment charging him with crimes related to decades-long pattern of physical and sexual violence against multiple victims. His use of force, threats, coercion to enact his will, protect his reputation, to fulfill his sexual desires. That's going to be the nastiest and creepiest part of it, because they kind of literally just spell out Diddy as a guy using millions of dollars to get his fix sexually, like just some deranged, decrepit type of creep who just needed by any means necessary to nut. You know what I mean? Which is, come on, right? The government respectfully submits this letter in anticipation of the defendant's appearance before this court later today, and in support of the government's request for the defendant's detention pending trial. As set forth below, there is no condition or combination of conditions that will reasonably assure the appearance of the defendant as required and the safety of others and the community. Not to mention the integrity of the proceedings. As reflected by the gravity of the charges in the indictment, the defendant is dangerous and poses an ongoing threat to the safety of the community. If released, he remains a serious flight risk, despite the conditions offered by his counsel. By the way, clearly, they anticipate that Diddy's counsel offered something. So we're going to try to find what Diddy's counsel offered. Or, like, maybe, I don't know if they would go with an official offering, but they probably just can make it a case that, he's not a flight risk. He'll show up to court. He'll stay in New York or some shit like that, right? We'll see if we can find that document. All right, most glaringly, the defendant also poses a significant risk to obstructing justice. Indeed, as set forth below, during the course of the charged conduct, which, by the way, we're going to get to that. I'll make a little note of it. I know a lot of people are saying, is he going to be charged for things he did in the 90s? By the way, one of these sex situations, right, with a 17-year-old, which I think a lot of people thought that was like the text. We talked about it last time, me and Myron. Textbook case of sex trafficking, right? You flew a 17-year-old underage girl from Pontiac, Michigan to New York by your private jet, and supposedly she had sex with one of your employees there, and then you later on sex trafficking, right? Except we're going to read the indictment. The indictment actually says they only started the racketeering conspiracy from 2008. So what he did in the 90s, including maybe the murder of Tupac Shakur, if he was ever involved, doesn't seem to be part of this indictment. Okay, so that's also very important to know for people who are, thinking about that, right? Okay, cool. This is going to be the thing that might keep him in jail. He has already tried to obstruct the government's investigation, repeatedly contacting victims and witnesses, feeding them false narratives of events, and as described in detail, there are simply no conditions that would ensure the defendant's efforts to obstruct and tamper witnesses will stop. The defendant, therefore, cannot overcome the statutory presumption in favor of detention. The court should order him detained. Okay? On September 17, 2024, an indictment returned by the federal grand jury. Okay. We're not trying to read the same thing twice. Okay, cool. Sex trafficking and abuse. Okay, most of this is gonna be in the indictment. So we'll just go through the indictment for that. What we should probably care about, and here we see the firearms, right? Even though I don't think that he was charged with a firearm crime, but the mere fact that, there's illegal firearms around while other criminal activities is alleged to have been going on, big problem, which the judge might factor in, right? Basically saying this guy is having an arsenal of illegal weapons while he's doing illegal shit, right? 59 rounds of .223 ammunition seized from his LA home. Obviously, that would be illegal. I don't know what the magazine capacity is in LA, but definitely you can't have no 59 rounds, okay? Not no damn drum, okay? In addition, 6 legally. So So he did have more guns. 6 legal purchased guns with serial numbers. Some were stored in gun safes, were recovered. So they're saying they were legal guns, but clearly they're not mentioning the legal guns. They only show the illegal guns. Although these particular guns, both the legal and illegal firearms, were seized, their presence in the defendant's homes demonstrates the defendant has access to them, surrounds himself with both guns and ammunition. Likewise, if the defendant were personally restrained by the court from obtaining new firearms himself, he could retain access to them through others. In sum, the defendant's regular use of violence and threats of violence, as well as coercion described above, against the victims and others, foster a culture of fear in which these individuals believed they were unable to reject the defendant's demands without subjecting themselves to physical violence or other abuse. Now, this is the important part. Him supposedly bribing witnesses and supposedly interfering, right? Throughout the time of the period charged in the indictment, when the defendant faced the possibility that his violent and criminal conduct could become public, the defendant and other members of the associates of the enterprise pressured witnesses and victims to not report what they saw or heard to law enforcement, or to otherwise conceal the criminal conduct. For example, as noted in March 2016, that's the Cassie video we all seen, the defendant was captured on video surveillance, striking and kicking and dragging a woman in a public area of a hotel in an apparent attempt to prevent her from leaving a freak-off. A member of the hotel security staff intervened. The defendant attempted to offer the security staff a stack of cash to ensure silence after the security guard refused the bribe, and after coordination between the defendant and his employees, the defendant's staff contacted other members of the hotel security. At the same time, the staff members were in close communication with the victim of the assault as well, all in an effort to cover up the defendant's assault and prevent the incident from being publicly disclosed. Within days of the incident, surveillance video disappeared from the hotel's server. So who had if it disappeared from the server, who had the video? Because we've seen it now. Okay. Similarly, throughout the period charged in the indictment, members and associates of the enterprise have reached out to multiple victims on behalf of the defendant to convince them not to report the defendant's abuse. Most recently, in 2023, immediately following the public allegations of a certain defendant's crimes, including his physical and sexual abuse of women, the defendants and other members of the enterprise made repeated phone calls to victims and witnesses, during which they provided victims and witnesses with false narratives of events in an apparent effort to conceal the defendant's crimes. So basically, last year, Diddy was ringing up the phone, calling people who could be victims. On at least 2 occasions, the defendant recorded those calls. Oh, wow. He recorded the calls on a co-conspirator. Ooh, this is going to be big. It says a co-conspirator. Now, when you hear co-conspirator in an indictment, it doesn't mean they're going to be charged, because sometimes there is unindicted co-conspirators, but they're basically saying whoever this person is was helping Diddy cover up crimes. They're not a victim, okay? Because everybody's going to be like, I was only fucking them guys because Diddy told me to, or I only beat up that guy because Diddy told me to. I wasn't doing it because I wanted to. Diddy threatened me, he was going to kill me, so I had to go kill them, or not kill them, but beat that person up, right? But they're saying this person is a co-conspirator, so this person was cognizantly helping Diddy. Anyway, thereby attempting to obscure his involvement in the instruction. So the government is investigation is ongoing. While the indictment against the defendant was on seal today, the investigation into his and other co-conspirators' conduct is active and ongoing. As a result of that ongoing investigation, as well as the defendant's charged conduct outlined above, including obstruction of justice and witness tampering, the government is limited in its ability to fully set forth all known details of his criminal conduct, including details of certain witness testimony. So they're saying there's witnesses who have told them about methods and means that Diddy has taken to try to cover up his crimes that they don't want to put right now in his detention letter, but probably is still an active part of the investigation they got going on, and probably will be in the case, right? To the extent that the court has additional questions about the charged offenses, or the charged offense conduct, or any other information set forth herein, the government is prepared to proffer additional information on an ex parte basis. Wow, that's huge. We got to get a lawyer on here. I got to hit up Bradford Cohen. We need the top legal minds. To break this down I'm only limited in certain scope of what I could break down and interpret for you guys. Okay. Now, we all know from the Young Thug YSL case, an ex parte hearing or communication means ex parte means without a party. And in the court system, you have the prosecutor, the defense, and the neutral arbiter, which is the judge. So any conversations or meetings that excludes one of those people is considered ex parte. So it's apparent that the prosecutor is saying, we have more information about some witness testimony that we know we're not gonna call anyone snitches here, because these are potential female victims. Again, this ain't a gang case, so there's no snitches, let's be honest, right? These victims, or alleged victims, they're probably are saying shit, either actively working or whoever knows what it is. And basically they're telling the judge, we'll tell you on the side what the depth, or if you have questions about, some of these things we're alleging, because we're not saying everything because our investigation's ongoing, we'll say it in an ex parte context. And again, unlike the the Young Thug case, this ex parte communication would not be seen and deemed as, as something that, it has some Brady element, which means, you need to disclose to the other side, because this is about bail and the conditions of bail and what could be considered isn't the same level of transparency as what you would expect in a trial. Now, if this was trial, it'd be very different, but this is just on bail. They're just saying, don't get this nigga bail. If you want to know why, we laid out some general shit. If you want to know the specifics, we'll come into your chambers or we'll do a sidebar. We'll tell you that. But don't tell Diddy, because that's probably, crucial to our current investigation, and we probably got more charges or maybe a superseding indictment. So that makes sense. So they start arguing some applicable law. They're using the Bail Reform Act, 18 USC, whatever. And they're basically just outlining that there is a lot of case law that matches up and actually co-signs their idea that Diddy should not be let out on bond. So let's go back to last night. We're talking to Myron. And when we're talking to him, primarily we said, well, look like Diddy's cooperative. And I said, at what point do you think this become uncooperative? And I mean uncooperative like he's like, I'm not gonna, and cooperative doesn't mean he's snitching, right? It just means they're communicating. Hey, we are investigating you, just to let you know. Hey, don't go too far. Hey, this grand jury proceeding might be wrapping up soon. Don't make it hard for us to find you. We shouldn't have to dispatch the marshals to come look for you under a rock. He's like, no, I'm not running. I'll come to New York. I'll make myself readily available. Maybe they've sat in for an interview session or two. Who knows? Here's the thing. Again, no matter how cooperative he's been, the prosecutors are still taking the stance. Yeah, he came to New York. Yeah, he's been quote unquote cooperative, but we still don't think he should be let out on bail. Keep in mind, all these cooperative things were to probably kind of have the prosecutors say to the judge, like, hey, he has been cooperative. We're going to, of course, put up a motion to oppose bail, but we're not going to go too hard. It looked like they're going pretty hard. And they're pretty much going as hard as saying, yo, he's trying to fuck up additional investigations we got going on, so definitely lock him up, right? So they go with dangerousness. They say he's charged with serious and violent crimes. It's charged in the indictment. I'm about to get some water. I can't lose my voice. Got like 9 hours to go. Oh, I got water here. Okay. So it says, as charged in the indictment, the defendant has physical and sexually abused women and others for the better part of 2 decades. Now that's the interesting part, because the indictment starts the RICO part of it starts in 2008, as they're looking at it, but they're saying for a better part of 2 decades. Well, actually, that's the better part. So since 2018, that would be 16 years, right? Yeah, better part. Okay, cool. Better part of 2 decades. The sex trafficking charge based on the defendant's abusive conduct, count 2, carries with it a presumption of detention. Wow. And they're citing direct statutes here. And detention is particularly supported by the facts of the case. Since at least 2008, the defendant has engaged in serious acts of violence, including forcing and coercing women to participate in sexual activity, including sex acts with commercial sex workers. I'm wondering if the sex workers, yeah, I'm guessing so, right? There got to be a couple sex workers that are, witnesses, like, are working, right? Like, yo, we're going to testify like Diddy paid us to fuck Cassie. They could describe the room. The shit smelled like KY jelly and a honey pack. It was no condoms. Niggas just had a cock ring, and the nigga was just in the corner with a fucking toothpick in his mouth, recording like he thought he was like on some, Steven Spielberg shit, and he was stroking his fucking cock, but he wasn't looking at Cassie. He was looking at me. Like, I'm pretty sure there's gonna be some sex workers that probably gonna say some shit like that, right? All right. Commercial sex workers by use of physical force, financial pressure, emotional abuse, narcotics. These acts described above, they were referred to as freak-offs, among other names. It involved orchestrated sexual performances facilitated through drug use that sometimes lasted days at a time. Also, you're gonna realize that they also say, and I'm skipping ahead here, but I'm just giving you a little bit of notice. They will eventually say that Diddy is facing a mandatory minimum, right? A mandatory minimum. And give me 1 second here. I just want to click back on this to see what's going on. Diddy is facing a mandatory minimum. Okay, nothing's happened out here. Cool. All right, yeah. He's facing a mandatory minimum of 15 years all the way to life. So it is very, very much possible that Diddy, I know last night people said I was trumping up, what he's facing, but I'll even go to it in this detention memo, which, again, that's going to be part of why they're going to want to take someone saying, hey, yo, this guy is facing and being incarcerated for the rest of his life. Like, I'll scroll down. It says 15 years. Let's see. Look, the risk of flight. Nor can a defendant overcome the presumption that he's a risk of flight. The crimes the defendant is charged with carry significant penalties, including a mandatory minimum sentence of 15 years imprisonment and a statutory maximum of life imprisonment. Now, we all know how it works on a federal level. If you get convicted on a federal level, there is only, pretty much one way. You could go below what they have imposed as a mandatory minimum. And you got to get that 5K1 letter. You got to be snitching, right? Now, granted, if we're thinking that, they kind of levy him to be the head of this enterprise, so who could he snitch on? So if he can't snitch, if he is found guilty on these things, right, even through a plea bargain deal, that's 15 years, right? 15 years, right? And again, remember, this is a mandatory minimum, which is why people are definitely scared of the feds, right? Like, they have imposed a lot of mandatory minimums that it doesn't really give to the judge discretion in what they think you should get. These are hard-line mandatory minimums that could only be bypassed for a very small handful of reasons. One, the biggest and the most known one, is snitching, which is if a prosecutor writes what's called a 5K1 letter on your behalf at sentencing, it tells the judge you have cooperated, snitched, and that they could now bypass a mandatory minimum. Okay? Again, we don't think that's going to be applicable here for Diddy. Who can he tell on? What is he going to tell on? Like some other mogul? Right? Like, come on. We don't even see that happening. But maybe it's possible, but, let's be realistic, right? So, if Diddy's facing minimum 15 years, minimum. How old is Diddy right now? By the way, I'm keeping an eye on this. How old is Diddy? 54. In 15 years, he'd be, obviously you'd have to serve 85% federally. So 85% of 15 years, 85%, it would be 8.5 if it's 10. So if it's 8.5, if it's 10, it would be 4.25. So it's about 12, 13 years. Yeah, 13 years actually. So yeah, 85% is 13 years about. Yeah, so even if that's the case, again, Obviously, I'm going to worst case scenario because who knows? Maybe it beats the case, right? Maybe it beats the case. Anything can happen. But if he gets a mandatory minimum, 15 years, he's 54. You get out in 13 years, he'll be 67, right? Like, could you get out at 67? Order another batch of baby oil and cock rings, and get the free calls back popping at 69 or 67 or whatever. Maybe, right? I don't know if the money's gonna be hitting the same, right? I think the financial discussion. I'm gonna see if I could. There's a few people I want to get on. For a criminal level, I want to get on Bradford Cohen. I'm gonna contact him and make sure I try to get him on today or maybe tomorrow. Bradford Cohen, let me see if I can break it down. I would love for him. I know he's probably bogged down today, and also he's not like just a media guy. He's a actual attorney, so he got his own cases. But let me hit him up. I would love for him to kind of break this down. I would love for him to break this down. I would also like for maybe an attorney or, I don't know if it was a financial expert I should probably go to. We got to figure out how Diddy, what would be the advisable thing to do if you're Diddy, a guy with allegedly a net worth of hundreds of millions of dollars, now facing life imprisonment. Also, you have your financial opportunities cut. Obviously, he's selling a couple of homes. He's liquidating a few things, but how does this work out financially? By the way, I'll show you this, which we'll get to it in the indictment. Where's the indictment? So this is the detention memo. We got the indictment here. By the way, let me just keep looking. Here, let me just keep looking over here to make sure nothing's going on. Nothing's going on. All right, so we see a little bit of movement here. These are the federal officers right here. So we're waiting for somebody to get on this mic. Pause, no Diddy. Here's the indictment. What you're going to see in the indictment, and I know I'm all over the place, but I hope you're following a little bit. The government is talking about forfeiture, and they're also talking about his assets, and they're talking about that, hey, he's probably going to owe some damages. And they're also pushing forth to say he could forfeit some assets if he can't pay it, or if he's transferred. I'll read it real quick. Forfeiture allegations. It says as a result of committing these offenses, they're saying according to he should forfeit to the United States pursuant to Title 18, right? Any interests that the defendant acquired or maintained in violation of Title 18, right? Which means any and all interest in securities of, claims against, and property or contractual rights of any affording a source of influence, blah, blah, blah. Okay. Let me try to get to layman's terms. Okay. He should forfeit any, look, here we go. According to Title 18, forfeit any and all property, real and personal, involved in, used. So they're saying if you had a freak off at your $60 million crib, we want to put that for a Title 18 forfeiture clause that the judge can say you forfeit that property because you used it for illicit crimes. By the way, we see this obviously with drug dealing, right? So like if you got a car, you got a Charger, and you're using the fucking Charger to transfer, move coke around the U.S., you know what I mean? At times, if they feel like there's damages, or if you had a bando, right? Like you use your grandma's house as the stash house, they might go for forfeiture to get to own your grandma's house because that's where the drugs was being stored, and they're saying that that place was being used as a place to continue this either criminal conspiracy or obviously to continue crime. So they are looking forward to possibly try to either, and you're gonna see they're gonna say we want maybe some injunctive shit to stop any property sales, that he don't try to liquidate shit, or Diddy might be like, yo, I'm about to put everything in my daughter's name or my mama's name, and they're trying to stop that too. Look, so real or personal involved in or using or intended for the use of commit or facilitate the commission of said offenses, and any property traceable to such any and all property traceable to such property, and in all property real or personal, blah blah blah. Are they saying the same thing like twice? Okay. Then they said, and in all property constituted or derived from the proceeds obtained. They're saying that if he made money from freak offs and bought a spot, they want that too. Right? They're using Title 18 a lot. Right? Cool. If we get to here, it says if any of the above forfeitable property, so they're going at it for real estate as an act of, if any of the above described forfeitable property as a result of any act or omission of the defendant cannot be located upon the exercise of due diligence, has been transferred or sold to or deposited with a third person, has been placed beyond the jurisdiction of the court, has been substantially diminished in value, or has been commingled with other property which cannot be subdivided without difficulty, is in the intent of the United States to seek forfeiture of the property of the defendant up to the value of the forfeitable property. So basically, if they're like, you have a property that has 5 other people's names and then we can't really subdivide it and get whatever interest out of it we need, we could try to get that interest from somewhere else.